Hi there, and welcome to Inside Archaeology, a channel run by an archaeologist, me, that explores the latest discoveries and stories shaping our understanding of the ancient world. No clickbait, AI voiceovers, or sensationalism, just real archaeology to be found here. You may have seen the headlines in July 2025 announcing that for the first time in history, scientists have successfully sequenced the genome of an individual from Egypt's Old Kingdom, unlocking secrets buried for over 4,000 years. In order to get the inside story of this monumental discovery, I sat down with the groundbreaking researchers behind this find to discuss how they decoded the ancient DNA, why it wasn't able to be done before, what it tells us about early Egyptian populations, and how it could rewrite what we know about Egyptian history. Whether you're a history buff, a science enthusiast, or just curious about the roots of civilization, this is a story that you won't want to miss. Before we begin, don't forget to take a few seconds to subscribe or like to help support the channel. All right, everyone, let's dig into the interview.
I was really excited by your research when I was reading all the headlines about it, because it is very groundbreaking, kind of the first time that we've done something. So just to start us off, can you introduce yourself and tell us how you got involved in this project?
I'm Adeline Moaz-Jacobs. I'm a researcher currently based in Italy. I started working as a PhD student at Liverpool John Moores University, and that's how we basically started to get involved into this project.
Professor Joel David Irish from Liverpool John Moores University in the Anthropology and Archaeology subject group.
How this project started, it's basically my PhD supervisor, who was based at Liverpool John Moores University at the time, who started to get really interested into trying to sequence again Egyptian remains, or basically remains from challenging regions. This was something done by scientists, something that the scientists has tried to done for a long time. But since it's extremely challenging to sequence ancient DNA from this region, it always failed. And given the techniques advances we had in the recent past, he said, okay, that's the moment, maybe it's the right moment to try again. And so he hired me as a PhD student, and we started working with a museum nearby, just on the other side of the road. That's the World Museum of Liverpool. And they had a collection of a few Egyptian individuals. And out of 5 different individuals that we tried to extract DNA, it's how we got this, we managed to get this individual's DNA.
Can you tell us a bit more about when they were excavated, the site they're from, and the condition that they were in?
They were excavated by a man named John Garstang. He was a very famous Egyptologist. He was affiliated with the University of Liverpool. And he excavated at the site of New Ararat, which is near Beni Hassan in Middle Egypt. He excavated there between 1902 and 1904. And he found many burials, and they were all related to about the 3rd and 4th dynasties, at least at New Ararat. And this particular site consisted mostly, well, there was several interments, but there was also some rock-cut tombs. And this individual was found in one of the rock-cut tombs, and he was interred also inside of a giant ceramic pot. So that's where the remains came from. And at the time, the Egyptian government, the Antiquities Service, would split the material recovered between themselves and between the excavators. And so they kept all the most important stuff. And then some of it was allowed to go to Garstang, which came back to Liverpool. And it's been here ever since that time.
Can you give us a brief background? It's not my area of expertise, and I'm sure it's the same for probably the majority of the people watching. How does ancient DNA work, and why exactly has it been difficult to sequence the DNA in the past? Because I think it's something that people think would be easy, because when we think of Egyptian remains, mummification, they're some of the most well-preserved bodies is like in the archaeological record. So the fact that it's actually difficult to do this on them is something that I think people have a hard time wrapping their head around.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what the first geneticist interested into getting ancient DNA thought, actually. Like back in the 80s, someone called Svante Pääbo actually tried to get ancient DNA first from mummified individual. He couldn't get it. We now think it's because actually mummification process destroy DNA faster. They preserve the macroscopic, but they degrade the molecules faster.
Oh.
Well, so ancient DNA is challenging. Basically, people have tried to extract DNA for a long, long time before being successful, because after death, you have a bunch of like environmental and chemical processes happening that degrades the DNA. So the DNA is cut into smaller chunks until at some point it will just disappear. And it has some damages that also can be a challenge for the machine we use to sequence accurately, because they will basically stop the machine from reading the DNA sequence.
And so you mentioned that there's now been advances in technology, and your supervisor thought these might be what allow you to sequence the DNA. What's changed, basically?
The big revolutions happened some time ago, let's say 20 to 30 years ago. And that was like there were two big revolutions. And then from those two big revolutions, we had little progress in techniques that can really improve the amount of DNA we can recover. But first, basically, there's something called the PCR. Maybe you've heard of it during COVID. Like we all got tested through PCR. So it's a way to amplify the DNA before putting it into the sequencing machine to read the DNA. Before that, it was a very tedious task to do. So it was super hard. It took days. And now in the 90s, someone invented like a machine that can do it in like a few minutes, basically. And now we can also sequence more efficiently. The sequencing device as they would sequence in parallel thousands of DNA copies. So it reduces cost. And when you have DNA from ancient samples with like just a tiny bit of DNA of interest from the actual individual we want to study, and all the remaining DNA is bacterial DNA, then in this case, it makes a big difference that you can sequence heavily on a low budget. So then you can actually increase your chances of getting the target's DNA you really want to find.
Oh, fascinating. Now you've been able to have this amazing discovery as a result of this new research. Can you tell us exactly what you have found?
We could reconstruct the genome of this individual. Basically, we'll have almost his whole genome, maybe like some parts are missing. And so thanks to this, we can actually infer the ancestry of this individual, where his ancestors are from. What we found is that using a set of reference of ancient genome that were sequenced by other research groups, 80% of his ancestry matched North African population, previous North African population. The remaining bits, 20%, match Eastern Fertile Crescent population, and more specifically, population who lived in Mesopotamia during the Neolithic.
That's really exciting. Was it something that when the results came back, was it a surprise, or were you perhaps expecting it?
So I think it's a hard question to answer, because it doesn't sound surprising right now, maybe because it's like basically we know Egypt was probably a crossroads of culture and people, and it's like the two areas that are the closest to Egypt. But it was surprising in a way because it's the oldest genome. So before that, we had no precise and direct information on their genetic ancestry. The only insight we had were from morphological study. And now with genetic, we can go into more details. So it was surprising also because even though it kind of matched what people have found already with morphology, it gave us more details, such as the fact that the best proxy for this 20% Eastern Fertile Crescent ancestry is from a group that lived way before the Neurat individual, the individual in our study. They lived around almost 5,000 years before him. And we can really, from the model we're using, we can really tell this with the amount of, the amount of data and the diversity of data we have now in the world, it's now the best population to match this 20%. And so it's quite surprising. So old, maybe it means that the admixture, the moment where people from Egypt and Mesopotamia mixed was quite a long time ago, or around 5,000 years before this individual. So that's about 10,000 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe it's from another population that is still unsampled and that lived more recently.
The method of burial is partially what we think allowed for the DNA to survive in order for her to look at it.
Right.
But you did the osteoarchaeological analysis to complement this. So what exactly did you find when you were looking at the skeleton itself?
Well, I did a full osteobiography, I guess is the way to do it. I laid the skeleton out and I worked from top to bottom. I looked in detail just to see what this guy was like. Because what I really am interested in is not just looking at this individual as a specimen that we got some DNA from, but I wanted to reconstruct who this guy was and learn as much as we could about him. I only wish we knew his name, because I know in a lot of tombs they'll have the names of individuals. So we don't know his name. The skeleton itself, when I got to it, was about 90% complete. So, I mean, we already knew that he was a male because we recovered the Y chromosome. But I did the standard osteological way of looking at mainly non-metric traits, but also metric. And he is clearly male based on the skull, based on the pubic bones, based on everything. And as far as his age, which is something that DNA can't do, I did all the classic studies, used the classic methods. It turned out to be on the low end, maybe around 44, 45, but more likely the upper range, he went up to perhaps 64. He's probably in the 60s range, because not only did these traits somewhat converge toward that end, but he had osteoporosis, which is something that you're going to get with a more advanced age. His teeth were incredibly worn. Now, they're going to be worn anyway in Egypt because you're going to get a lot of grit and so forth, but his were very worn. So he was probably even at the upper end. And he also had a heck of a lot of arthritis. So that's why I think he was probably toward the 60s end of the age. Mm-hmm. Then I went and looked at his stature. He turned out to be probably about 159 centimeters tall, which for Americans like me, who don't know what that means, that would be about 5'2". So he was fairly short, even for this period of time. Then I next did biological affinity. Now, this is what the whole idea of the genetics was to determine his biological background. But something that I've done for decades is I look at the dentition, but also craniometrics, to determine the relatedness to other populations. And what's really cool is that in this case, we knew who he was based on genetics. So now it was interesting to see if the teeth and the craniometrics actually agreed with it. So it was like a case study to see if these methods work. We take the measure, the dental morphology, the features, the root surfaces, and so forth, and compare it to 7 other world samples. This guy's teeth were in pretty rough shape, so I only got 15 traits. But based on that, he came out to be Western Eurasian with 99% probability. Okay, that makes sense. Then I did the craniometrics. He came out to be closest to a group of Iron Age individuals from Lachish in what is present-day Palestine. Secondarily, he came out to be most like Egyptians from the 26th to 30th dynasty. So craniometrically, he's right exactly where he should be based on what we found with the genetics. Then, of course, I looked for paleopathology. He was actually in pretty good shape as far as any hard tissue disease or whatever. Didn't show anything obvious that he was ill in some way, but he did have a heck of a lot of dental wear, and he had a fair amount of degenerative joint disease, which or also known as osteoarthritis. So, you know, it's just typical of an old age. But as far as how he was doing pretty good, considering how old he was. And then what I next focused on was the skeletal markers of physical stress. So you got a background, you got an idea of how tall he was, male, so forth. But I wanted to get more information on his individuality, what his background was. And so There are many people that believe that there are certain features on the skeleton, like different muscle markings, the way the muscles are attached, the amount of osteoarthritis, the locations of it, and so forth, that you can get a good idea of what this individual did during their lifetime, so their life history. And also, a lot of people believe that you can not only determine the types of positions and movements that they did a lot during their life, but that you can then infer what they did for a living. So this is all circumstantial. Very interesting stuff. I mean, he just stood out. He was one of the most interesting skeletons I've ever looked at for what happened to him. But then taking the leap from, okay, he has this, to what his occupation was, that's a leap of faith. So he had standard cranial features of a male, somewhat robust. But what he also had was a very incredibly large hook of bone that was on the back of his skull. That's for the attachment of the neck muscles, nuchal muscles. And normally they're bigger in males, that's fine. But this one is incredibly large. That was the first thing that stood out to me. And so based on that, that means that he was leaning his head forward a lot, and he was doing this chronically. It's found in teenagers a lot today.
Mm,
You know why?
looking at their phones.
Yeah, looking at their phones. I mean, I found these articles about all these teenagers with these massive nuchal muscles and this massive spur on the back, both males and females, from constantly looking down at their phone. So this guy was looking down chronically based just on that. Secondly, I looked at his dentition. A couple of things of interest. He had incredibly worn teeth. In one case, he had a horrible abscess on his upper right first molar, not even in the form of healing when he died. So this guy would have been in a lot of pain. He was getting infection, and it could be the cause of death because it's near the brain, but I don't know. And then the next thing is you look down, you go into his neck vertebra, and what they showed were amazing amounts of osteoarthritis, both on the facets and both on the bodies. Incredible amounts of lipping, polishing, eburnation. I mean, this guy, it must have just been horribly painful. And again, it's because he was looking forward. So not only did he have the thing on the neck, on the back of the skull, but his neck, he's looking down. So just incredible arthritis on the cervical vertebra. Then I next looked at, for example, the scapulae, the shoulder blades. You got lipping on the socket, lots of lipping around there. Now that can be, it's from arthritis. That can be just normal aging, but it was even above and beyond. There was also evidence, something called a supraglenoid articular facet, which means he was also raising his arms over his head a lot. There's all sorts of muscle markings all over the scapula, which would be indicative of him holding his arms out a lot and doing a lot of like movement back and forth. The back of the humerus is showing a huge deltoid tuberosity, and you're also looking at raised insertions for the teres major. But also was kind of interesting that it didn't really expect is the lower arms look fairly unremarkable. But on the the left radius, the right one is missing. The radial tuberosity was just flattened completely. Normally that shouldn't happen. What that happens from is when you are holding your arms out in front of you with your elbows down to your side, and that can happen, and it's from carrying heavy loads. So we got him doing this, we got him doing this, and we got him walking around with his elbows bent, holding heavy loads. So he's doing all of these things with his arms. Then moving down to the bottom half, moved right to the pelvis. What was really interesting were his ischia, the what do you call them, the sit bones. They were amazingly inflamed and enlarged, especially the left one. So what this is indicative of is chronically sitting on a hard surface. So like a low stool or sitting on the ground for long periods of time. Then you look at the upper part of the leg bones. So you've got like the head of the femur, and there's a depression where it attaches as a ligament that attaches into the acetabulum of the pelvis. And normally they're not very large, just a few millimeters. These things they're incredibly deep, and they're about 3 times larger in diameter than they would be on, let's say, you or me. So what this is indicative of is him putting his legs straight out in front of him. It can also be seen on people who ride horses a lot because they spread their legs out to the sides. And so bottom line, you're stretching this ligament, and it's causing the depression to get larger and deeper. So this guy was doing something like that. There's also some tendon attachments that shows, again, that he was sticking his legs straight out. This is something that you normally wouldn't see. So sitting on his butt with his legs straight out in front of him on a flat surface or hard surface. Moving down, the knees are fairly unremarkable, but he's got amazing squatting facets. And so you've got the squatting facet on the front of the tibia, and then you've also got it on the surface of the talus. I've seen this before, but this is more than normal. So what this looks like is he was not only squatting, but that he was bending his feet back as well. Like if you were to be sitting on your knees and then your toes, your feet under you, and your toes tucked under you. So that was the next thing. Speaking of toes, I looked then at his feet, and unfortunately a lot of the parts were missing, but there was enough there. And what this was the most unusual thing I could think of. First one, not so much, but the distal end of the proximal phalange of the big toe on the right side has incredible arthritis. It's got lipping all the way around it, and it's just highly polished. It's just like someone glossed it all to hell. And that's because the toe would have been pushed back a lot. So a lot of movement of that. And what I found also interesting is that the arch of the foot, so if this is your foot, these parts here, the metatarsals, there's a joint surface between them and they can move. And in this case, the facets of where the metatarsals come together are incredibly arthritic in the right foot only. There's a large amount of lipping around it, but also polishing, eburnation. I've never seen this before. That means that he was somehow moving the arch of his foot much more than normal, like either this way or this way, but the opposite foot has none of this. So he was doing something very unusual with just his right foot, at least as far as the arch compared to the left foot. So based on that, I looked at a whole series of tomb paintings. So tomb paintings dating all the way from about the 3rd dynasty, 5th dynasty, all the way up to the 12th dynasty, 18th dynasty. And these are in tombs of rich people, and they have, you know, pictures of all these folks doing manual labor. And I was trying to find, okay, this guy's got some really unique stuff going on. Can I potentially identify what positions these different laborers worked in that would match what he had? And the only thing they really match, I mean, potentially a weaver, because they're going to be on the ground a lot. But the best one that I could come up with is a potter. But they're all doing everything that you would expect to happen. They show them reaching out, making the pot. They show them sitting on the ground. They show them reaching up, so they're like stoking a kiln. They're mixing up the clay. They are carrying heavy pots, so you see them carrying heavy pots like this, reaching out. Some show them with their legs straight out. Some show them with their toes incredibly dorsiflexed as they're kneeling. And so it just, again, arbitrarily or, you know, just completely conjecturally, it matches up with that. And he was found in a pot. That doesn't necessarily mean that much because other pot burials are known from that time. But, you know, the only way we would know for sure is if this was a sign that says, you know, I'm Bob the Potter, or he was found with a half-made pot in his hand. So again, this is all conjecture, but it just seemed to match that best of all these different possibilities.
I've read, or I think it was in the paper, or it was in some of the stories that I've read about it. They talked about how this is kind of unusual because, you know, a potter isn't necessarily like a high income kind of job, but his tomb seems to be like quite an elite style. Do you have any theories as to why why the two might match up, or?
Yeah, that's completely bizarre. So yeah, a rock cut tomb, that is a lot of work. This guy had to have some influence somehow. A pot burial, that's good, not necessarily elite, but it's a thing that does happen. He wasn't buried with any offerings of any kind, so it's not potentially a super high elite tomb, but yes, he was in an elite tomb. Why? I don't know. Maybe he was just a really darn good potter, or maybe he was working for a rich guy who really liked him a lot. The two are incongruous. I don't really know.
Maybe he owned the pottery.
Maybe he owned the pottery. Yeah, maybe he had a big business that he was running on the side and he made a lot of money. I don't know. It's interesting. So it's incongruous that he was in such a tomb, but had in such a hard life.
In addition to the osteoarchaeological analysis, did you also do isotope analysis as well? Can you just tell me a little bit about the results from that?
They got it from the dentition and they were looking at strontium isotopes, which kind of gives you an idea of where the individual had grown up. And it was showing that it was regional. Now, there's not really good strontium maps of Egypt, so we can't specifically locate it, but it's showing that, yes, he is from the region. And we also did oxygen isotopes to show that he had grown up in a hot environment. So it's not like he moved there from, I don't know, Norway or something of that nature. So that helped to confirm that he was local in addition.
Mhm.
And it was, it was like, okay, maybe this guy was just visiting his relatives and happened to die there. No, it's probably that's what the other folks there were like. But again, it's only one guy. So we need many more individuals to donate their DNA so we can figure this out for sure. No, I mean, and we hope to be doing that with Egyptian scientists down there who are really doing some good work on DNA themselves.
Yeah, so that was kind of my follow-on question was, obviously your paper concluded saying that this is one individual representative of it's not representative of an entire population, obviously, and it's quite rare to get the DNA from remains this old. So, but hopefully with these new tools that you have and the fact that you guys have done this cross-disciplinary approach, you can start to build a much bigger representative sample, hopefully in future. Is that the plan, or?
Yeah, we're going to try to do that. And it's not also that so much that it's the age, because we, as you know, we've got our people got DNA from Neanderthals and so forth, but it's the incredible heat there that just destroys it. So that's why it's so rare to find it anywhere in Egypt. And so it might be another, who knows how long before DNA is found at this level of preservation again.
The Francis Crick Institute, with whom we collaborated for this study, and where they did the sequencing, and it's where I did my postdoc following the PhD to finish analyzing the genome of this individual. They're very eager to study remains from Egypt and from all the challenging regions that are understudied currently.
It's really interesting, I think, that it's come from something that's in a collection that's just been sitting around for about 100 years, rather than it's come straight from an excavation, fresh from an excavation that's just been done. So it just goes to show that stuff in these collections that we have that we've already looked at still could have some really interesting information for us to give to us in modern day.
Yeah, it's amazing what you can find in these old collections.
I saw in the study that another thing that you were able to find was some information from his DNA about like his skin color and eye color, etc. And then we're able to do a reconstruction of how he might have looked like off of that. Can you tell us a little bit more about that process and how that was determined?
So basically, we're using a system that was developed first for forensic science. It's a system that tags a few positions in the genomes that can reliably, depending on the population, I will go back on this, depending on the population of origin of the person, that can more or less reliably tell us the features such as pigmentation, hair, and eyes. And we found that he had likely a brown to dark skin color. He had brown eyes and brown hair. So in a way, not unexpected as well. Then there's something to take into account is that those forensic tools were first developed for Western population and present-day population. We can easily imagine actually that there were mutations back in the days that were influencing the pigmentation that are lost now, or they're not present in the Western, European, or American population. And so we have no idea that this mutation actually influence more the skin pigmentation. That's a limit.
You've touched on it a little bit, but can you explain why exactly this discovery is important or significant?
Well, it's important because it helps us to understand how basically the Egyptian society worked. It's a piece of the puzzle. We knew that there were contacts, trading, exchanges of ideas between North Africa, Egypt in particular, and the East, the Eastern Fertile Crescent. Now we can actually say that it was made through also mixing of movement of individual to some extent. Of course, it's only one single individual for now. So that's the story of one lineage. We don't have the full picture of the full community living there or across Egypt.
Thank you so much for joining us for this fascinating excavation into the first ever sequencing of an Old Kingdom Egyptian genome. I want to just say a huge thank you to our guests for taking the time to speak to me and sharing their work and helping us better understand the people behind one of the world's most iconic civilizations. If you enjoyed this interview, let me know your favorite part in the comments, give it a thumbs up, share it with fellow history and science lovers, and don't forget to subscribe for more exclusive conversations with the people uncovering our past. This is just the beginning. More discoveries are being made by archaeologists every day, and Inside Archaeology is bringing them straight to you. No clickbait, no sensationalism, no academic ivory towers, just real people sharing their work about uncovering the past. If you liked this video, don't forget to check out my monthly discovery. If you liked this video, don't forget to check out my monthly discoveries series. I feature finds from all over the world that span the entirety of human history. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you on my next adventure inside archaeology.